In January, there was a scramble over who's going to get what jobs in the new administration. And at one point, there was someone who was being discussed for a job in the intel world, and a member of the SSCI, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and Intel Committee, went to the people making the decision and said, you cannot hire this person because this person will be certain to push for the release of the JFK files. You have a sitting member of the United States Senate whose main goal is to keep those files secret. And then you have to ask yourself,
why? Yeah.
Exactly. Why?
So why don't you expose that person, first of all, so we can start chasing
Tom
after
Cotton of Arkansas did that.
Tom Cotton?
Yes.
It's no secret that Republican Senator of Arkansas Tom Cotton is bankrolled by the Israel lobby. However, so are the majority of politicians, and they're not getting nearly as much money. So what makes Tom Cotton so special to the Israel lobby? Because the Israel lobby groomed Tom Cotton from the very beginning to be placed in a position of power overseeing the U.S. intelligence agencies. This article from 2018 titled, Tom Cotton, What's the Reason for AIPAC's $4.5 million support for the young senator? Back then, there were reports coming out that Tom Cotton could potentially be appointed director of the CIA or the U.S. National Security Advisor. However, the main question is, what's the reason for this huge unnatural support of Zionist lobbies, AIPAC in particular, for Tom Cotton? Given the young age of Cotton compared with other American politicians and his commitment to Tel Aviv, the Israeli authorities have tried to use him as an influential factor in U.S. domestic security and foreign policy. Cotton is consulting AIPAC before making any decisions in the field of U.S. domestic and foreign policy and asks for the views of the lobby's leaders. Even in cases in which AIPAC doesn't express its views on critical issues to American senators, Cotton has the duty to indirectly impose AIPAC's stances on senators and even on key members of the House of Representatives. It's even more shocking. Here's another article from 2018 titled, Who are Tom Cotton's advisors? Since 2014, the AIPAC lobby insisted on Tom Cotton's presence in the Senate Committee on Intelligence. AIPAC, after choosing Cotton as the Arkansas senator, insisted that he should certainly be serving in the Senate Intelligence Committee, which Cotton promptly accepted because of his dependence on AIPAC. Today, Tom Cotton serves as the chairman for the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence.
Do you consider yourself a Christian Zionist?
Senator, I'm a Christian, and I robustly support the state of Israel.
I support Israel's existential war in Gaza. I assume, like me and President Trump, you support that war as well, don't you?
Senator, I do.
Washington, D.C. is occupied territory. It is totally owned and controlled by Israel. And so if you deny that, you're denying reality.
You've also said that Congress is an Israeli-occupied territory. Now, what do you mean by that?
The Congress of the United States is Israeli-occupied territory. What I meant by that is the most powerful lobby in Washington, which Congress can't stand up to. One of the most powerful is certainly the pro-Israeli lobby. It has gotten its way in this town year in and year out. And I don't think the automatic votes of the Congress of the United States for $3 and $4 billion worth of aid to Israel are necessarily in the national interest of the United States.
6 out of 7 members of the task force assigned to declassifying federal secrets actually work for AIPAC. Wow, so that guarantees the only government secrets that are going to be released are going to be non-Izzy related ones, such as how much Izzy bribes and controls our politicians. How much exactly does AIPAC control our politicians?
By the way, everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What's that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter.
Not just by money. They control our politicians because Izzy controls our media and who they give good press, bad press to, and commercials to. They control our courts in which politicians get sued and which politicians don't get sued. They control our social media and education system. They are the staff and secretaries of many of our major positions. Case in point, Monica Lewinsky. Izzy Media even admits they tried to blackmail Clinton over that. Same article even admits that Izzy tapped the White House phones. You're not doing that sort of stuff unless you got people on the inside. And they got people on the inside. It's not just by money alone that they have a detailed control over all our politicians. They make sure to control all the functions of our government itself and all the pillars of influence.
Much our elected politicians don't want people to know they're receiving from AIPAC. This is the Track AIPAC X account. This account works so fast. Anytime a US politician tweets anything, this Track AIPAC account will comment with an image of how much money they're receiving.
The United States gives Israel $14 billion. Israel takes $100 million of that and gives that to AIPAC. AIPAC then gives $9 million back to Donald Trump. See how this works? So they're just bribing us with our own money. That's what this is supposed to be pointing out.
AIPAC is winning all of America's elections, but it's getting harder and harder for them to win those elections. They're spending more and more money and having less and less certain outcomes. And now with more and more people waking up to what AIPAC is, Israel's control over American elections, it's going to get harder and harder up until a breaking point where it just becomes impossible for Israel to win any more elections in America.
Israeli lobby AIPAC told its members to lie to Congress to say that the reports of people starving in Gaza is false. The document instructs reporters to claim that people starving in Gaza are false and say that Israel's not blocking the delivery of aid into Gaza. Tell everybody to say all the reports of people starving in Gaza are false, and that's actually a tactic by the H group to exert pressure on Israel. Here's a photo of the document. The first line says basically Israel's not blocking aid. Make sure to tell everybody Israel's actually facilitating aid into Gaza. If any aid is not reaching Gazans, so just go ahead and blame it on the H group. Just so we're on the same page, the UN reports that 40% of aid trucks trying to enter Gaza were denied or impeded access. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz, this journalist with a sense of humanity, actually talked about Israel's denial of starvation in Gaza. He talks about the Israeli authorities and pro-Israel keyboard warriors who systematically deny the evidence of expert research that Gazans are starving. Also states that this is an attempt to deny horrors committed by, quote, our side. They are beginning to question how the Israeli lobby AIPAC has so much influence on US elections while being so closely tied to a foreign government. The truth is, it's a lot more shady than you would think. Back in the 1950s, the Israeli lobby AIPAC was actually called the American Zionist Council. Now, if an organization in the United States is found to be working on behalf of a foreign government, they're required to register through FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Well, it was found that the American Zionist Council was doing just that by spending tons of money on propaganda for the new country of Israel. When that was found out, the Department of Justice tells the American Zionist Council, hey, you have to register as a foreign agent. For several months, they say no and just try to ignore it, to the point where it got to a Senate hearing. Determined they need to register, and the Department of Justice says, hey, you have 72 hours to register or you're screwed. They straight up ignore it. 2 weeks later, JFK is assassinated, and 2 weeks after that, they send a letter back saying, hey, we're just not going to register. During Lyndon B. Johnson's presidency, the pressure is a little bit lower, and they just go back and forth for a few years. By this point, they already incorporated AIPAC. They shut the American Zionist Council down, and then apply for tax-exempt status. The shady part about this is when they get their tax-exempt status approved, the IRS tells them that their previous organization, the American Zionist Council, can also have that tax-exempt status fall on them too. So we're on the same page. If you're tax-exempt, you don't need to share where you're getting your money from. Basically, for several years, the United States government is fighting with an organization that's working on behalf of another country. They escape registering, AIPAC is born, and then AIPAC is able to get away with hiding that organization's financial information. If you're trying to understand why AIPAC is able to get away with so much, because nobody's been ever able to stop them.
If you live in America, who can't you criticize? Who can't you criticize in America? That tells you who controls the country. Now, you cannot criticize the power of the Israeli lobby in this country. And the power of the Israeli lobby in America is the most detrimental force in America.
According to the IRS, a 501c4 organization, which is what AIPAC is because it's considered a social welfare organization, must be operated exclusively to promote social welfare. The primary purpose of the organization should not be political campaign intervention. However, it is permitted to engage in some political activities as long as these activities do not constitute its primary function. I think it's pretty much obvious that that's its primary function. I'd say that's a violation, guys. Worth pushing. The IRS can audit 501c4 organizations to ensure compliance with tax laws, and if an audit reveals that AIPAC's primary activities are political, the IRS can take action.